The cargo bay of the Stellar Harmony fell silent, except for the steady hum of life support systems. 4 alien crew members stood frozen, their various appendages raised in horror as they watched the human named Marcus Chen methodically slice what appeared to be rotting vegetation with a thermal blade. "Stop him!" shrieked Zeftar, the ship's Kytherian medic, her crystalline exoskeleton flashing urgent red warnings. "Those plant stems have been decomposing for 3 solar cycles. The toxins alone could dissolve his internal organs." Marcus looked up from his makeshift cooking station, a repurposed maintenance panel he'd converted into a heating surface. Steam rose from the sizzling green stalks that the aliens had marked for biological waste disposal. His dark eyes crinkled with amusement as he observed the panic spreading across his shipmates' faces. "It's just asparagus," he said calmly, flipping the vegetables with a makeshift spatula fashioned from a bent piece of hull plating. 3 days old isn't even close to spoiled by human standards. We actually prefer some vegetables slightly aged. It concentrates the flavors." Engineer Vox High, whose slug-like form had turned a sickly yellow-green, began frantically tapping commands into his portable scanner. "Impossible. Our analysis shows cellular breakdown, bacterial proliferation, and chemical compounds that would be lethal to any known organic life form." The Nexari pilot, Captain Velnara, spread her 6 arms in a gesture of bewilderment. Her species had evolved to consume only perfectly fresh, living plant matter within moments of harvest. The concept of deliberately consuming aged vegetation was as alien to her as breathing methane. "Human Marcus, please cease this self-destructive behavior immediately. We cannot lose a crew member to food poisoning 3 weeks into our mission." Marcus chuckled, adding what appeared to be small white granules to his cooking vegetables. "This is just salt," he explained, noticing their renewed alarm. "It's a mineral. We use it to enhance taste." He took a piece of the asparagus and bit into it, chewing thoughtfully while his alien colleagues watched in fascinated horror. The 4th crew member, Dr. Ithlak, a tall, ethereal being from the Whisper Nebula, began recording everything with multiple sensory devices. His species sustained themselves purely on energy absorbed from cosmic radiation, making the entire concept of physical consumption utterly foreign. "Remarkable," he murmured in his melodious voice. "The human appears to be experiencing pleasure from this act of controlled poisoning." Marcus swallowed and smiled. "Look, I appreciate the concern, really. But humans have been eating aged foods for thousands of years. We ferment grains to make alcohol, age cheese until it develops mold, hang meat in caves for weeks, and even eat fish that's been buried underground for months in some cultures." The revelation sent another wave of shock through the group. Zeftar's medical scanner began beeping frantically as she aimed it at Marcus. "Your vital signs appear normal," she reported with disbelief. "No cellular damage detected. No toxin presence in your bloodstream. This defies all known biological principles." "Different species, different biology," Marcus replied, seasoning another batch of vegetables he'd retrieved from the waste container. "What you see as decay, we might see as flavor development. What you consider toxic, our digestive systems often handle just fine." Captain Velnara's compound eyes dilated with a mixture of admiration and terror. "Your species consumes biological waste deliberately?" "Not waste," Marcus corrected gently. "Food that's reached optimal ripeness. Some of our favorite foods require aging processes. Wine gets better with age, cheese develops character, bread needs time to ferment." He paused, studying their expressions. "You really can't eat anything that isn't absolutely fresh?" Engineer Vox High's scanner readings painted a sobering picture. Fresh consumption is essential for survival across all known species. Our digestive systems are designed for peak nutritional absorption within the first few hours after harvest. Beyond that, cellular breakdown produces compounds that range from mildly toxic to immediately fatal. Dr. Ithlak floated closer, his curiosity overriding his caution. "This suggests human digestive systems possess extraordinary resilience and adaptability, perhaps even beneficial bacterial colonies that process what other species cannot." Marcus nodded enthusiastically. We have trillions of microorganisms living in our digestive tract. They help us break down complex compounds and even synthesize some nutrients we need. It's a symbiotic relationship that's been evolving for millions of years. The implications hit the alien crew simultaneously. Their human colleague wasn't just surviving what should have been certain death, he was thriving on it, extracting nutrition and pleasure from organic matter that would hospitalize or kill any of them. Zeftar's crystalline form shifted to a deep blue, indicating profound thoughtfulness. If humans can safely consume degraded organic matter, this could revolutionize interstellar travel logistics. Food storage requirements, emergency protocols, mission duration capabilities. That's not even the impressive part, Marcus said, starting to clean his improvised cooking equipment. Wait until you see what we can do with really challenging foods. The alien crew exchanged glances filled with a mixture of scientific fascination and existential dread. Their human crewmate had just casually demonstrated an ability that seemed to violate fundamental biological laws, and he was suggesting this was merely the beginning. As Marcus finished his meal and began storing his makeshift cooking supplies, the aliens found themselves re-evaluating everything they thought they knew about biological limitations. The human had consumed what should have been poison, derived nutrition from decay, and showed every sign of perfect health throughout the entire process. The vast universe suddenly seemed a little less hostile and a lot more manageable with a human aboard. 2 days later, the crew's amazement at Marcus's dietary abilities had evolved into scientific fascination. Dr. Ithlak had requested permission to conduct controlled observations, turning the ship's secondary laboratory into an impromptu research facility focused on human digestion. Today's test subject, Dr. Ithlak announced to his colleagues who had gathered around the observation window, consists of preserved protein sources that have been stored in high-sodium solutions for over 6 months. Marcus opened a sealed container and withdrew what appeared to be small, wrinkled, brown objects floating in cloudy liquid. The smell that escaped made Engineer Vox-High recoil so violently that he knocked over his scanner. "Great galaxies!" gasped Captain Velnara. "That odor signature indicates advanced decomposition with potentially lethal bacterial contamination." "These are olives," Marcus explained, popping one into his mouth and chewing with obvious enjoyment. "Mediterranean style. Cured in brine. They're actually considered a delicacy where I come from." He offered the container to his alien audience, who collectively took several steps backward. Zeftar's medical sensors were working overtime. The sodium levels alone should dehydrate your cellular structure. The fermentation byproducts should be attacking your nervous system, yet your biometric readings remain completely normal. Marcus reached into his personal food stores and produced another container. This one contained what looked like white chunks floating in liquid that had turned slightly yellow with age. Aged cheese in oil. This particular variety is about 8 months old. The demonstration continued as Marcus consumed increasingly bewildering substances. Dried fish that had been preserved with salt until it resembled leather strips. Fermented vegetable pastes that had turned colors not found in nature. Pickled fruits that had been soaking in acidic solutions for longer than some of his crewmates had been alive. Each item, Dr. Ithlak narrated into his recording device, represents a different preservation technique that humans have developed to extend food viability far beyond natural biological limits. Salt curing, acid preservation, controlled fermentation, dehydration, oil suspension methods that create conditions hostile to life, yet humans derive sustenance from them. Engineer Vox-High had been running calculations on his scanner throughout the demonstration. The chemical compounds present in these substances should have overwhelmed any biological system. The concentration of preservatives, the pH levels, the bacterial cultures, it's creating a storm of potentially toxic interactions inside the human's digestive tract. "But that's the beautiful part," Marcus said, opening a new container that released an aroma so intense it triggered the ship's air purification system. "Our digestive systems don't just tolerate these compounds, they've evolved to work with them. The acids help break down proteins. The beneficial bacteria compete with harmful ones. The salt regulates fluid balance." What Marcus had opened appeared to be fish that had been buried in salt, until it resembled crystallized amber. He sliced off a piece with his thermal knife and ate it without hesitation. This is botarga, fish roe that's been salt-cured for months. Some people call it the caviar of the Mediterranean. Captain Velnara's 6 arms trembled as she processed this information. Your species has developed preservation techniques that mimic the conditions inside gas giant atmospheres or volcanic vents. You've essentially learned to consume substances that exist in some of the most hostile environments in the galaxy. The revelation prompted Dr. Ithlak to access his extensive xenobiology database, cross-referencing human dietary capabilities with known galactic species. The results are unprecedented. Humans appear capable of consuming organic matter across a wider range of degradation states than any previously documented life form. Marcus cleaned his hands and faced his audience. That's still not the most impressive part. We don't just survive on these foods, we've built entire cultures around them. Different regions of Earth developed unique preservation methods based on their environment. Desert peoples learned to dry everything. Coastal populations mastered salt curing. Cold regions perfected, controlled freezing and fermentation. He gestured toward his remaining food supplies. Every technique represents thousands of years of human ingenuity and biological adaptation working together. We turned the natural process of decay into a tool for survival, and eventually into an art form. Zeftar's crystalline form had shifted through several colors as her cognitive processes struggled to integrate this information. This suggests human evolution occurred in an environment where food scarcity was a constant threat. Your species developed not just the ability to consume aged food, but the wisdom to create it deliberately. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. When fresh food wasn't available, we found ways to make it last. When those preservation methods created new flavors, we refined the techniques to enhance them. What started as survival necessity became cultural tradition. Engineer Voxhai looked up from his calculations with something approaching awe. The implications for space exploration are staggering. Food storage weight could be reduced by orders of magnitude. Mission duration could be extended almost indefinitely. Emergency scenarios involving contaminated or aged supplies wouldn't necessarily be fatal. Dr. Ithlak began compiling his preliminary findings. The human digestive system represents a biological marvel that defies conventional understanding of organic limitations. They possess not just tolerance for hostile chemical environments, but the ability to extract nutrition from them efficiently. Marcus smiled at his colleague's fascination. And we haven't even talked about cooking yet. The statement sent a visible ripple of concern through the assembled aliens. Captain Velnara's compound eyes focused with laser intensity. Cooking? We deliberately apply extreme heat to organic matter to alter its molecular structure, Marcus explained casually. Sometimes we char the surface until it's carbon. Sometimes we expose it to open flames. We even have methods that use controlled combustion to add flavor. Loves. The silence that followed was pregnant with implications that none of the alien crew members were quite ready to contemplate. Their human colleague had just suggested that his species deliberately subjected their food to processes that sounded suspiciously like torture by fire. Tomorrow, Doctor, Ithlak announced weakly, we will explore human thermal food processing techniques. Marcus grinned. I'll bring the hot sauce. The emergency klaxons shattered the peaceful atmosphere of the Stellar Harmonies research lab. Captain Velnara's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. Tense with barely controlled panic. All crew to emergency stations. We have a critical situation developing in the cargo bay. Marcus and his alien colleagues rushed through the ship's corridors, Dr. Ithlak's recording devices forgotten in the urgency of the moment. They arrived at the cargo bay to find a scene of controlled chaos. The ship's environmental systems were running at maximum capacity, and an acrid smell permeated the air. Report, Captain Velnara commanded as they assembled. Engineer Voxhai's normally calm demeanor had cracked. Containment breach in Storage Unit 7. Our emergency food supplies have been contaminated with atmospheric processors from the Kepler station. The chemical interaction has created compounds that are... He paused, checking his scanner again. Universally toxic to all known organic life. Zeftar's medical readings painted a grim picture. Exposure levels are climbing throughout the ship. At current contamination rates, We have perhaps 6 hours before the toxic concentration becomes lethal. The air filtration systems can't process these specific compounds. Dr. Ithlak floated toward the sealed storage unit, his sensors detecting energy signatures that made his ethereal form flicker with concern. The contamination appears to be spreading through the ship's recycling systems. Even if we could jettison the affected storage, the compounds have already entered our life support infrastructure. Marcus stepped forward, examining the readouts on Vox-High's scanner. The chemical signatures looked familiar, though the context was entirely foreign to his shipmates. What exactly are we dealing with here? Captain Velnara gestured toward the sealed unit with obvious frustration. Our entire emergency food reserve has been transformed into something that registers as weapons-grade poison on every scanner. Months of carefully preserved, perfectly fresh organic matter rendered completely inedible. The irony, Zeftar added with bitter humor, is that jettisoning it into space would violate 17 different galactic environmental protection treaties. We can't dispose of it, we can't neutralize it, and we can't survive with it aboard. Marcus studied the chemical breakdown displayed on the scanner. Sulfur compounds, organic acids, fermentation byproducts, bacterial cultures running wild in an uncontrolled environment. To his alien crewmates, it represented an unprecedented disaster. To him, it looked remarkably familiar. How much contaminated food are we talking about? He asked. Engineer Vox-High consulted his readings. Approximately 4 tons of mixed organic matter. Enough to sustain the crew for 3 months, under normal circumstances. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. And how long until the next resupply station? 47 days, Captain Velnara replied. But that's irrelevant. We'll be dead from toxin exposure long before we reach it. Actually, Marcus said, rolling up his sleeves, I think I can solve both problems simultaneously. The alien crew stared at him with expressions ranging from confusion to horror as understanding began to dawn. Absolutely not, Zeftar declared. I will not allow you to commit suicide by consuming concentrated toxins. Marcus was already moving toward the storage unit, triggering the emergency override codes. It's not suicide. It's lunch. He paused at the control panel. Well, lunch for the next month and a half. Dr. Ithlak's sensors were reading energy signatures that defied his understanding of biological processes. Human Marcus, the contamination has created chemical concentrations that exceed anything you demonstrated in our controlled experiments. True, Marcus admitted, opening the storage unit and revealing the devastated food supplies. The once pristine organic matter had transformed into something that looked like a battlefield between competing bacterial armies. Molds competed with yeasts, acids broke down cellular structures, and the entire mass had taken on colors that didn't exist in nature. But here's what you don't understand, Marcus continued, examining the contaminated supplies with the eye of someone evaluating ingredients rather than surveying a disaster. What you're seeing as uncontrolled contamination, I'm seeing as advanced fermentation. These chemical signatures aren't just familiar, they're delicious. He selected a portion of what had once been perfectly preserved grain but now resembled something that might have been discovered in an archaeological dig. Spontaneous sourdough fermentation. The bacterial cultures have created natural acids and alcohols. In human terms, this has accidentally become artisanal food. Captain Velnara's 6 arms spread in a gesture of complete bewilderment. You're suggesting that our environmental disaster has become your gourmet cuisine? Marcus bit into the contaminated grain, chewing thoughtfully while his shipmates' scanners registered chemical interactions that should have been immediately fatal. Not gourmet exactly, but definitely edible. The sulfur compounds add complexity. The bacterial cultures provide probiotics. The acid levels are actually perfect for breaking down the more challenging proteins. Engineer Vox-High ran frantic calculations. If the human can indeed safely consume the contaminated supplies, it solves the disposal problem. But 4 tons of material for one individual over 47 days. About 125 pounds per day, Marcus calculated. Ambitious, but manageable, if I pace myself and focus on the higher calorie components first. He surveyed the contaminated supplies with the strategic eye of someone planning an extended campaign. I'll need access to the ship's thermal processing units to make some of this more palatable. But yes, I can clean up this mess. Doctor, Ithlak began recording frantically. This is unprecedented. The human is proposing to consume toxic waste at a rate that exceeds normal caloric requirements by orders of magnitude, while simultaneously solving a life-threatening environmental crisis. 7. Zeftar's medical scanners were working overtime, monitoring Marcus's vital signs as he continued sampling the contaminated food supplies. Remarkably, his biological systems are not just tolerating the exposure, they appear to be processing the compounds efficiently. No cellular damage detected. No toxin accumulation. It's as if his digestive system was specifically designed to handle this exact scenario. Over the following days, Marcus worked systematically through the contaminated food supplies. He developed preparation techniques that would have been considered elaborate torture by his alien colleagues, but which he recognized as various forms of cooking, curing, and fermentation management. The ship's air quality steadily improved as he removed the source of contamination one meal at a time. Captain Velnara found herself documenting the most unusual crisis resolution in her career. Personal log. The human crew member has successfully eliminated 4 tons of hazardous waste by consuming it as sustenance. The method appears to be not only effective but sustainable. The human reports that some of the accidentally fermented materials represent the best food he's had since leaving Earth. By the time they reached the resupply station, Marcus had not only consumed the entire contaminated food supply, but had actually gained weight in the process. His alien colleagues had spent the journey documenting what they were beginning to recognize as one of humanity's most remarkable survival adaptations. Your species, Doctor, Ithlak observed as they prepared for docking, possesses the ability to transform environmental disasters into nutritional opportunities. This suggests an evolutionary history involving challenges that would have driven most species to extinction. Marcus smiled, patting his slightly expanded midsection. We're pretty good at making the best of bad situations. Though, I have to admit, accidentally fermented grain storage turned out better than I expected. We should see if we can replicate those conditions intentionally sometime. The silence that followed was filled with the dawning realization that their human colleague was already planning to deliberately recreate what they had just experienced as a near-fatal crisis. The universe, they reflected, was a much stranger place with humans in it, and considerably more survivable.